Finance Committee to order for September 25, 2007. We have 3 items on our docket for today, and anything else that anyone is inclined to add. The first is a question of additional funds for the office of our county attorney. This would be for this fiscal year and, of course, in future fiscal years. Mr. Roberts presented his information to us several weeks ago to another committee, and a motion was made in the council to refer it to the Budget and Finance Committee. So here it is. If Mr. Roberts, if you could, and we have in our packet, I don't know if you saw our packet from today, but we have a letter from you of September the 16th, a letter from you of May 7th, and also one from February 2nd, 2006, and the copy of the adopted budget for fiscal year 2008 for your office. That's on page 14 of the packet. Do you have a? Yes. So if you have any remarks you'd like to make at this time, it would be appropriate. Being an attorney, I would assume you have remarks.
I really don't. I mean, I was asked to come back, and nobody said really the message was not that I was supposed to talk about anything particular. I mean, I'll answer any questions that you all have. Life's going on in our environment. I can tell you that I've met with, one additional thing, I've met with our child support people who, we got 48 people employed in child support, and we don't have anybody who can speak Spanish. The one lady who did is now moved up to Eastern Kentucky with her husband, and it's too far to drive. It's like an hour and 45 minutes to drive. She didn't want to go, but she did. So we are now totally without anybody to speak Spanish, and that's a problem. Now, I'm addressing that as well with the state, because the state supports the child support budget, and our next budget is in next July. So if we have anybody who is not able to speak English, and we do have a lot, maybe 2 a day, sometimes more than that. Sometimes we miss a day, they don't have anybody but that speaks Spanish. We got a major problem. We can't deal with them. And the same thing's true on the other side. I mentioned that in my letter from the standpoint of the prosecution side of the budget, which is where you all are with the administration of our office. We need somebody, and if I had somebody, I'd let them work in child support whenever they need them, when they have somebody go in there to tide this over, because we can't service the individual who can't speak English, and we got a number of them. So I'll be glad to answer any questions that any of you have. I don't want to keep talking about things we talked about last week, or the time I was here.
Okay, are there any questions for Mr. Roberts? Mr. Maloney has a question.
I think, Mr. Roberts, my questions you answered in my last meeting. My question really goes back to this council is funding due, and I know that they're getting ready to come out with a report in January for our audit, and sometimes we have a surplus of money that comes around, and I thought maybe after, I think you're one of the needs more important, just one of the most important issues we have around it, because the large population of Hispanics that you have coming through your doors, that I believe you're having a hard time with communication. And one thing that I like about what you all could do in that is that the apartment complex that some of these Hispanics are living in conditions that are unfit for what they have, and then without the language barrier, they have no one to go to but you guys. And to me, there's a need for that language, and you may, after what you talked about, you need to have a couple paralegals, I believe, or
yes, sir.
That I don't know but I'd like to make a motion when this surplus money comes in November that this makes as one of the top of the list. So move.
Mr. Maloney, would you state your motion again, please?
When the report comes in November on our audit, and if there's a surplus, I want to make sure they're on the list as a recommendation for funding.
You recommend, the motion is recommendation that the county attorney's office be placed on the list for possible funding pursuant to our audit report and a surplus. Second by Mrs. Gorton. Is there a discussion? I do have a question. It looks like the report that we have accompanied your letter shows a shortfall of about $200,000. Is that
In operating expenses?
Yes.
Yes, sir, about 237.
And traditionally, most of your budget comes from fees that you collect.
Yes, sir. You all give us $4,500 a year and have for the last 12 years, or 10, and the state gives us, I thought it was $1,500, it's $3,000. I think it's, as of this year, it's $3,000. So we get a total of $7,500 to run our office, and so we've got to use a number of different means to generate money to do that.
The Vice Mayor has a question.
Can I ask, Larry, I'm not following that. You said that you give, meaning the council or the
Yes.
funding through LFUCG is $7,500?
$4,500.
Well, so what's the $487,382?
Well, yeah, I don't.
I'm on page 1 of the letter to Councilmember Myers on September 16th. It says,
That's the salaries.
LFUCG provides the county attorney the annual sum of $487,000 for salaries of staff. Well,
That's for salaries, Jim.
okay.
He was asking me about operating expenses
Okay.
in addition to salaries.
Over $2 million, of your total $2 million, what is it, $2 million budget, $2 million in change, big change, what is it, $2 million?
2.1 for revenue and 2.3 for expenses. Yeah.
Okay, of your total budget then of $2.3 million, LFUCG is providing $487,000, is that correct?
Plus $4,500 for
Okay.
operating expenses.
Yeah, that's really change in the context of $2.3 million.
You're right.
But $487,000 is not change.
That's right.
So that's a fair, so we really need to, our lens needs to be on that number and not on 7,500 or 4,500, doesn't it? Well, our attention needs to be on this number as a percentage of your total budget and what that represents over history. We're looking at 1 year, 2.3 million. What has that been in the last 10 years? Or 5 years? I mean, give us some sort of track on what this represents, is what I'm saying.
Okay, I didn't know that was the question. I guess I can go back. I don't have that figure here. I think I might be able to pull it, but I certainly can get it by this afternoon to give you what the last 5 years was. I don't have it here on our budget, but it's, I know the operating expenses of the $237,000 we have to generate every year has not changed at all. That, I mean, we've continued to go up in that, but that's for machines and paper and all the stuff that we do, and I've got it listed there for you, of all those operating expenses. That's $278,000 or $76,000 down at the bottom of the right. I can give that to you for the last 10 years if you want. I just didn't know you wanted that.
Well, I think that's the only way we can really intelligently evaluate, the request.
That's fine.
Is to look at the history of funding, your budget today, how that budget has itself changed over time. I mean, was it $2 million last year and it's $2.3 million this year? And the reason it went up was, these strategic initiatives or these requirements that we had to adjust and change. We're hearing you on the Spanish. I mean, I think that message is clear as a need. But this all has to do with preparation for that November, where it was just suggested that we look at it again when we have some sense of what a surplus is going to be then.
Well, I'll be glad to send that to you. Nobody asked me to do that, and I just don't have those figures with me. But I mean, what I'm dealing with is a budget that I've inherited and what we need for this next year to operate. And as I told the council the last couple of times I've spoken, I mean, we're going to survive this year, but it's a crisis in happening, and so that's why I want to get something at least on the table with y'all thinking about it. The other, that 600,000 or the 487,000 is the figure that you all pay us for salaries. And I said in my first paragraph, we are $85,555 short. That means we have to find another $85,000 to make those salaries and the benefits come up to even. That's a huge figure for us. And we're doing it. I mean, we've got the salaries that we've got to justify. And that's not even talking about the operating expenses. Are you with me on that? You know,
Dr. Stevens has some numbers here that he's looking at too, and we're having a sidebar conversation associated with those. I think, I'm speaking for myself, but I'll put it this way. Way my brother sometimes says when he looks at numbers and listens to presentations, he says, I don't think I understand all I know here.
Okay.
There's a lot of information, and understanding that, like Dr. Stevens is just pointing out a number of 780,000 that represents the funding for this year. Is that correct?
Yes, according to our record, 728
total funding.
from the Urban County government.
Yes, sir. That would be, and it's broken down on that one sheet I gave you of the salaries, which is $626,000 plus the $200,000 that you are giving us. It was 100, and you all raised it to 150,000 more. So we have $250,000 that you all gave us, or ratified, which is an addition to our budget. So now we're up to the figure you said. And that's what that is, that $250,000, which was the salary for Richard Vemont, the $100,000 rent that makes us even, okay, and the other $30,000 employee, that is the $250,000. And so that makes us even, except we're going to be $80,000 short on the salaries that you all are providing, and they're listed up there. Now, this is something. These salaries are going to go off. It's not going to be that same amount. It's going to be less. And I told you all last time that I was with you. I've got 3 employees, 3 lawyers that I hired. They're Noel Caldwell and well, I don't even have them. I'm wrong. They're not even listed there. We're paying for those not out of your budget at all. We're paying for it out of the money that we've got in savings. Those guys are going to be taken over by PAC in October when they pass the bar. So that's not your salary issue at all. PAC's going to take that. We're paying that out of money. We've got it in savings from past years in tax collections. So these are the salaries right here that we've got that we need to get up to $80,000 to make them just even. Otherwise, we're going to have to raise the money to pay that, which we'll try to do.
Mr. Southers had a question, too. Mr. Southers is the budget analyst for the Urban County Council.
Like the Vice Mayor said, there's a lot going on with your different letters and the requests, and as I look at them, and I know we're moving across different periods, but on page 14, I don't think you have that. Let me give you a copy of that. Excuse me.
Next up will be Mr. Blevins and Mr. Myers.
On page 14, it shows the adopted budget.
Okay.
Which was approved by the council. And it looks like that for 08, fiscal year 08, you've been approved for $728,760.
Okay.
For 07, fiscal year 07, $478,000. So that's $250,000 increase.
Yes, sir.
And from your letter to Councilmember Myers, where, and I'm trying to just bring some clarity.
Okay. Is that the last letter?
Yeah,
Okay.
Yes, the last
Okay.
letter
All right.
was dated, I think, September the 16th.
Yes, sir.
If you look at page 4 of that packet,
I don't have page 4. What is that?
you should.
Oh, here. Okay. Oh, in this packet.
that
Okay.
packet,
All right.
that's good.
I got you.
And of course, I know we're looking at '06. That's what these numbers, you said 10 years in your letter, but I think you meant fiscal year there, because that's what these numbers represent. But anyway, the difference between your total revenue collected and your total expenditures, it looks like year-to-date, you were operating at a deficit of $205,000. Or
Okay,
Yeah,
all right.
$205,000. Is that correct?
Well,
Well, I mean, that's what the numbers say.
okay,
Yeah, I mean, that's
I would assume that's correct, because every year we have to generate a lot of money to stay afloat.
Sure, and I'm not
yeah.
questioning that. But with the 200, and these are '06 numbers from the, looks like from the auditors.
Yes, sir.
Unaudited, but still. But it looks like, in trying to understand, you know, if the government approved, the council approved $250,000 more, then we need to reconcile what the difference between what you were given and what you're needing.
Understand, easy. We moved from our building on Short Street and Upper to a new location at 110 West Vine. Our rent went up $100,000 for your portion. The state has the same half. So I made that request that we need an increase in our rent to make us even so we can float. That was $100,000. The council, or the mayor gave me that in initial meetings, and that's all he gave me. I was asking for $1.8 million or whatever. He gave me $100,000. That's part of it. I came back to you all on the last day that was allowed, and I made the request, and you all gave me a salary for Richard Vemont to be the civil attorney, and he was being paid out of our private funds that you weren't paying for, and a new lawyer at $33,000, so that's a total of $150,000. $250,000.
Now the requests are in addition to what you were funded, and I know one of the things was the $85,000.
Yes, sir.
And then you're looking to add 2 new employees, a paralegal / secretaries, Spanish speaking.
Yes, sir.
So, and that's $50,000 because of $25,000. So really what you're needing now is your request, and I'm trying to understand, is your request now the $85,000 plus the $50,000 for 2 additional employees?
Yes,
And
sir.
then maybe some office funds for office supplies?
I don't think we need office supplies. No, I mean, yeah, I mean,
So
that
it's
would be,
$85,000 plus 50, so about $135,000 is what your request is for right now.
plus the benefits that would attach to those salaries.
Sure.
Yes, that would, yes, sir. That's my first 2 issues there.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
okay, very good, thank you.
Mr. Blevins?
Thank you, Chair. I'm looking on the same page, page 4, and on there, there's the Prosecutorial Advisory Council PAC funds of about $1 million in '06.
Yes, sir.
I'm in the right place? And as I understand it, that's your state money that pays strictly for lawyer salaries for your state-level prosecutions.
Yes, sir.
And they don't give you any sizable amount for your office expenses either, right?
$3,000.
$3,000, okay. My question I had is, how many attorneys does that $1 million fund?
I think 16. We have, I can tell you exactly, we've got, Richard Vemont is not under PAC, okay? He's a lawyer with us, so I count him as one of our lawyers.
Round numbers is fine.
I think it's 17 total.
17 or so?
Yes, sir.
You're proving my point. You must be paying them dirt. Because if you do professional salaries, a loaded salary for just about anything, lawyer, engineer, anything, is a good $100,000 anyway. So that would be 10 best case. If you're doing 17, that means you're paying them not near enough.
Well, I mean, we
My
start them at
opinion.
$33,000, which is ridiculous, but I started 3 this
I'm
year.
in agreement. We're in violent agreement, as we used to say in my previous career.
Okay.
The point I'm trying to get to here is, how in the world can the state only fund us $1 million a year? And I don't want to take the light away that we have our own responsibility as a local government. I agree to that and so forth. But I'm seeing another problem here in that you're only getting $1 million from the state. What can we as a council do to help you improve that picture?
Well, I think I have the answer to that. I would love for each one of you to get to know what we do, so that when our PAC budget comes up, you can tell them what we're doing for you. I mean, I can go, and I did it last year, and, I mean, we're finally going to get a raise, I think, in January, a 2% bump, for these guys. I think we're looked on, generally speaking, like a tennis team at the university or a minor sport. And there's so much money to go around in the state, and I'm not bemoaning the fact that they aren't fair. I mean, I think they're fair to us. But yes, salaries need to go up. In the same token, if we can make this office, and this is what I want to do, and I told you all this before, if I can make this office a legitimate stepping stone to another job, then those young lawyers will come in and stay with me for 2 or 3 years and go. Mm-hmm. And I can still do it that way. I don't want to have 17 lawyers making $80,000. Because when they're 55 and 60 years old, they're going to be tired, generally speaking. And I don't want that. I'd rather have the young guys and energetic people there. So I could do a whole lot better if they were at 40,000, but they're not. So we're doing what we got. And we got 3 brand new ones on, and they're really good students, top-notch kids.
Well, where I was getting to is that, yes, we as a government owe our own portion of this, funding this service. And what we're talking about today is just getting you to a basic level of being able to provide those services. We haven't even discussed paying a fair and reasonable salary to these attorneys. We haven't discussed raises, anything. And in that context, that brings the state back in with us. So I want us to remember the state has a share of this problem as well. One other question, Mr. Roberts. Do you set the salaries, or is that set by the state or something like that?
I do.
You have the ability to set the salaries?
Yes, sir. And so if somebody quits, somebody's been here a while, I'll take that guy's salary and divide it up generally, or hire one new one at 33 and pay the rest to the other ones to get them up. So you don't rely on the state to continue with the 2%, maybe. So I've been able to do that this year. And, I'm fledgling here. I've only done it 1 year. So,
right.
But yes, that's what I've done.
All right. Thank you. That's all I had.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Blevins. Mr. Myers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Roberts, I guess where I see the real opportunity for you here is in the letter that you wrote to me that the council has or the committee has. After number 3, the second to last paragraph, you say, on a latter note, I know this office can save the Urban County government a considerable amount of money that is currently being expended for legal fees to private law firms. And that's what I was asking the last time you were here to receive a proposal from you on, because I believe you're correct in that statement, and I think that that's the real opportunity to put more money into your budget, is to show us as a city, as a council, what you can save the city by doing our outside counsel for us. I know you can't do all of it, but the portion you can do. And then you get the revenue off of that, which will, in turn, provide revenue for you. So do you have any thoughts about, or have you thought about since the last meeting how much money you could save for us, maybe how much work you could take from our outside counsel?
Yes, sir. Do you want this back?
You can have it.
Okay. Yes, sir, I have. I couldn't answer your question because I don't know what the city pays. All right? I don't have access to that. You all can find out real quick. One phone call, and you can know exactly how much you're spending for legal fees for private attorneys. That's the question you all have got to know, and I don't. But I can tell you this. It isn't cheap. They're not doing it $55 an hour. I'd be amazed if they were. So you're probably paying $100 an hour or more or multiples of those fees to a private law firm, wherever they are. I mean, I was in one, and I did it. I represented the city in a case, or the coroner, so I know. And it's a good job. And I'm not trying to tell you to take money away from private law firms, but it ought to be looked at to see, can other people be utilized?
Sure.
And all I know is it wouldn't cost you anything for us to do it. We got 3 lawyers who could do it right now. I can try a case tomorrow on any case you've got. So if we start with some of them, just whatever the law department wants, if they want help, and I've offered it to them even before I took office, that we're available to help in litigation, take depositions, whatever they want. We can do it.
I'll tell you where it might help the council and this committee start, is if you could give us maybe some categories of law that wouldn't create conflicts or anything like that, that you think that you have the expertise to handle inside your office.
Well, sure, I can tell you right now. I mean, obviously, anything could be a conflict if there are parties involved that we're related to, but normally it would be a suit against the city, for which I don't have any conflict, If the city gets sued, a police officer gets sued, or some kind of a damage suit is brought, then we would have the capability of defending that. Now, I might have prosecuted somebody involved in that, but, I mean, it's an individual basis. You'd have to look at it and say, well, you know, is somebody related to this police officer or something? You know, but that's what your city law department has to do anyway. Lawsuits against the city, litigation.
Okay.
I know nothing about corporate law or property or anything. You wouldn't want me. But trial work, yes, we can do. So jail suits, possibly. Yeah, there's any of the litigation issues that involve city liability, I think that we could probably help in.
Okay.
We don't have to take it over. I'm not trying to do that. I'm just trying to assist.
Well, thank you very much. What I would ask then is that the committee put together a request for the administration to look at what it is that we could outsource to Mr. Roberts as opposed to outside legal counsel.
If you can hold that while this motion on the floor is taken care of, then maybe you might want to make a motion.
Thank you.
Mr. Maloney, then Mr. Lane.
Just Mr. Logan's here. Maybe he can come down and answer what some of the questions that Mr. Myers has asked and the county attorney, and see if there's some way we can partnership in some of these lawsuits that we have out there, and why we can or why we can't, or maybe y'all might be able to work something out.
Oh, excuse me. You snuck up on me. Good to see you. Yes, sir. We have, I believe it's about, I'd want to check this number for sure, but I'm going to say it's maybe 25 suits where we have outside counsel currently, and we haven't assigned any this year. So we have some that are ongoing, some of which you know about, that would be kind of difficult to start involving people in that have been going on for a while. But whether there would be a possibility for partnering, I'm not really sure. We're trying to handle more in-house, and we've been making a conscious effort to do that this year. But we do have some ongoing cases. Some of them are pretty far down the road, try to involve other people in them, and some of them are probably outside. You know, they're not your typical. I don't think you can say, well, any case that the city is defending, that any attorney could step in and do it. I don't know that it's quite that simple, but to the extent that there would be some way to partner somehow, I mean, we would certainly look at it. I wasn't aware of it. Nobody's ever contacted me about this issue, so I don't know. But we'll certainly take a look at it.
Well, can you, now that you know about it, I mean, I understand some of the lawsuits that we've had ongoing, but some of the, well, we'll get sued just about every day. Something new comes up, but
Right.
Can you sit down with them in case it does able to save us some funding, and it's something that they could do? Or how do you decide what case stays in-house and which one doesn't? And when the one that doesn't stay in, how y'all decide who gets those cases?
Well, there are really two or three categories. One would be a specialized case, for instance, the defense of the EPA action. I don't think Mr. Roberts and his crew would want to, I don't know if they've got any experience in environmental matters. I suspect they don't. It's very, very specialized. That would be an example of something that's very specialized, where I think you need to get someone with that kind of expertise. We also have cases where the case is large enough to where it is very, very difficult to handle it in-house. The Berry case would be a good example of that. That's been going on for a while. You all are familiar with that. Numerous plaintiffs in that case. The other instance is in a case where we actually have a conflict, and every now and again those will come up, where we've actually represented, say, an individual employee in a matter where we're defending it, and then they would turn around and be involved in another action back against the government. And in those instances where we have a conflict, we're not able to, the law department's not able to handle those cases. So those are really the three main categories where we would seek outside counsel. As I have indicated, we have not done that this year. Everything that's come in that's new that we've handled in-house.
Okay. But if you do get one, hopefully you can maybe try to work with them, see if they can do it.
Sure. If the need arises, sure, we would be willing to consider that. Absolutely. Now, I think the question was, one of the early questions was, what about the current cases we have? Would we be able to do that? And I don't really know. We have to take a look at that.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Commissioner. So you'll be able to respond to Mr. Myers' question without us making a formal motion?
Yes, sir. And let me make sure I understand exactly what you want, Councilmember Myers.
Excuse me, I am going to make a motion regardless of his
Okay.
response.
We'll hold off on that then.
Okay.
Mr. Lane, then Mr. Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Roberts had a couple of questions. I was just curious, you know, with the budgets you had and you're exceeding your budget for expenses, could you sort of explain how you got a little bit out of alignment on budget? Was some of the revenue that you anticipated hard to project, or what threw you out of balance as far as your budget?
I inherited it. I mean, I came in and, I mean, it's there. And so the way that's evolved is this. For years, the county attorney never came before you and asked for money to be supportive. You had a budget and you find it and off they go. And so what was happening, at least what I've observed, what was happening is that we are operating on property tax collections and received a great deal of money on 1 year, like, I don't know, $700,000. And Margaret Cannonson put that into bonds immediately. So it's been earning money. And then the next years after that, we didn't get much money from tax collections, but that was the money that was feeding, you know, making us float. So we dip into that $50,000 and pay what the expenses were. And that's carrying us right now. Then we have cold check collection, which basically pays for the employees who work there, pays their salaries. So that really isn't a money maker. Diversion is now a program that we are expanding, where we are able to make a little money. We're paying 2 people to operate the program, but we then have some money left over that we can pay expenses on that is helping us. But those 3 things are the areas, and that's the only other income we got.
I see, and the changes that you made, the adding of Mr. Vemont and moving the offices, that's where we provide the additional $250,000 to cover those estimated expenses for you.
And rent.
Right.
Yes, sir. The $100,000 rent. Yes, sir.
Okay, well, I think I get a better understanding of what your dilemma is. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lane. Mr. Gray.
Thank you, Dr. Stevens. I know we've got to move on with our agenda, but I do want to say, I think everybody's been impressed, Mr. Roberts, with as you've taken on this role, with the energy, enthusiasm, conviction that you've picked it up, that you picked up with it, and I still think we need to, if we're going to be looking at this downstream a couple of months, we need this analysis that looks back, that gives us a 5-year picture that illustrates the total budget for the office.
Okay.
The amount that LFU-CG has provided, and that gives us then, that helps us understand the growth in terms of the total budget growth. And just to confirm a couple of things, Larry, it's my understanding that that what is driving your increased budget is increased caseload. Is that correct?
Well, yes.
Caseload and demand on the staff?
We couldn't possibly do it with the case, with the people that I had coming in. We've increased those positions to handle the budget, to handle the caseload. In addition, we're being killed on traffic cases, volume. It's 300 a day. It's a huge thing. And the police department's going to a new system of, instead of writing the ticket, now it's on electronics. It's on their computer. And we know that it's going to increase dramatically. But that's 4:30 to 7 o'clock every day. So.
Okay, well, that's really why I was asking this question. If you've got a substantial backlog of work to be engaged and you're focusing on these issues where, as you've described it, you're really behind the curve and your staff needs to be focused on that, then why would you take on more work in an area that's new? Is that because you've got, and I'm talking about the city's backlog of work, is that because you've got extra capacity in that area? Because, that's the only way I can read it. If I've got if I've got a backlog that's staring at me, I'm not going to want to take on something brand new.
Well, you may not, and I understand that mentality, but as the county attorney, one of my duties is to represent all the county officials in cases. We don't represent any county officials in cases, except the coroner. Their choice has been to hire lawyers before, and I don't blame them. I mean, that was kind of a deal that's gone over for the years. But I'm standing ready to do that if they need help in litigation or counseling. And so I'm here, and I like trying cases. I like being involved in litigation. So does Vemont, and so does Brian Matone. So we'll work over. I mean, we'll get more done.
I think what we're interested in, and I'll stop here, but I think as a council, as this body, that our interest should be in funding areas where core skills and core competencies are at the highest level and where the need is the greatest. And that's why I'm concerned about picking up more business if you've already got a backlog of work that is troublesome and is problematic to get executed today.
We're not having problems getting it done. I've never said that with regard to the prosecution of the cases. In fact, what I've said is if you don't fund us, we're going to still do it. And they're going to work extra to do that. So, Jim, I'm not trying to work a 4-hour or an 8-hour day. In fact, I want our people to work more than that and get in the habit of being good lawyers so that they have value to them. And me, I don't have a time budget. So all I'm saying is if we can help the city, we'd like to.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Gray. Mr. Myers would like to speak again.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Oh, no, I don't need to speak on this motion.
Okay. I think everyone who wants to has had a chance to speak on the motion. One comment I would have is that the council has been frustrated in the past by the somewhat dilatory prosecution of things like code enforcement, speed, and other traffic violations, and we applaud you for stepping up the pace on that, and that would be welcome. Is there any other comment on the motion? The motion is that the county attorney's request for additional funding for this fiscal year be placed on the list to be considered at the time of the audit report, which we would expect at the end of next month, hopefully. All those in favor signify by pushing this button. We're waiting. Oh, there it is. Let's see. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? I don't see how this thing is working, Jeanette. We have a new system here of electronic voting so that everyone in the world can know how everyone voted, and it's supposed to be instantaneous and transmitted through the electronic waves throughout the world, but we're still on our maiden voyage. Oh, there we go. It's very magical because it recorded all our votes without us ever touching the thing. And I guess everybody agrees. Does everybody agree with what the...
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay. I will get you that report.
Okay, yeah, we need to collect some more information before, as Mr. Ray's intimated before, we consider this again, and it'll remain on our docket here at the Budget and Finance Committee.
I'll get it to you very soon. Thank you.
Ask a question.
Mr. Myers has another question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just for clarity, what I'd like you to do is to review your mission statement for your office and then look at the areas of expertise that you have in your office and then come back to us and give us a list of types of cases that you feel confident as an office to handle for us.
In civil litigation, you talk about?
Yes.
Okay, okay.
And then from that, I'm going to make a motion, once we have that information, that this committee put together a policy for the full council to look at with respect to when we outsource and where we outsource.
Okay, I'll do that. Be glad to.
Thank you.
I'll get it to you next week, the whole thing. Was it just by sending you all a letter, it goes, I guess, to your box somewhere? Is that how everybody gets it?
Just like to vote it.
Yeah, okay. I'll get all that to you.
Just magically appears.
If you send it to me as chairman of the committee, I'll be sure to disseminate it to all parties who are appropriate.
Okay, I'll be glad to do that. Sure. Great, thanks.
And were you going to make a motion today or later? Or?
No, I'm going to wait till we get his report back, and I'll make the motion based on what's in there.
Okay. Thank you. The second item on our docket is a conversation with Commissioner Cole concerning some of the items that the committee collected regarding preparation of our budget and the questions that arose from the last budget preparation. Commissioner Cole?
We haven't made nearly as much progress on this list as I had hoped. I guess I just have to say up front, this is one of those times that I probably overpromised and underdeliver. Most of our staff is so heads down now trying to get the year closed, and the budget folks are still trying to put together the document that you all passed in June to try to get that out. And quite frankly, we're working on some processes that are taking longer than normal because we're trying to set the stage for long-term change rather than jumping in and doing things quickly just to get it done. So particularly in the Department of Accounting, we're dotting I's and crossing T's so that when we come to this process again next year, that we don't encounter some of the same hurdles that we have encountered this year. So for that, I apologize. However, we have made some progress, and I'll go over that with you. I am, in fact, meeting later today. The first one you speak of here, or the first one on the list, is line item detail. I'm meeting with the folks from Metaformers, the consultant that we have on board that's helping us with the implementation of the budget module. I'm meeting with them later today to talk about how we get that information to you in a way that makes sense to you and isn't burdensome to us. So with that, I have to say we're still working on that one. We recognize, I think we know what you want. It's a matter of making sure that it's in the system appropriately. Personnel lapse is a decision I think you all are just going to have to make as we get closer to the new budget process. We will bring to you before we send out forms and that kind of thing. Those things go out to departments. We'll be running those by this committee beforehand, and we can then take a look at whether we want to consider using the personnel lapse situation the way that we've used it to this point, or whether we would like to go in a different direction. I talked to you briefly the last time, I think, about the way these kinds of things are handled in the state budget. That would be my recommendation. I still have my intern working this issue on what people do in other situations. I have to say that we're finding that most places budget the net of gross cost minus whatever you think attrition and everything else is going to be. So that's a decision for you. The contingency fund, I'm not quite sure how much more you really want me to do on this issue. I think Councilmember Lane has been kind of carrying the water on that particular issue. I do sense, though, that we actually are talking about almost two different kinds of contingencies, one being what you have in place right now as a rainy day fund, and the other perhaps being some kind of flexibility within the money that you appropriate to have money to fall back on, rather than perhaps and I don't, we've referred to it as Christmas in November, and that's, that's not, not very techno-speak here, but that's what we've referred to this in the past, of finding out how much money is available, and then, and then making provisions to spend it, that maybe we do that within the budget process, that there's some kind of contingency, and that we know what your priorities are for that contingency spending. Again, it's something that we would have to enact as we go forward with the next budget and not deal with particularly in this one. Projection data, this is something that we will be working through the Lexington 2015 group with. And again, that's one of those other places that the mayor is actually still waiting for the list that I'm compiling for him to make appointments. I apologize on that one, and I will get those names to him this week, and we'll get moving there. Spending plan is much like we just discussed in the contingency. On the next page, capital planning. We have had some folks in Frankfurt review the process that my intern has put together on a capital improvement planning process. We've been working with the management partners folks that are on board doing the management audit. We're ready to finalize the forms and the instructions that we'll be using for that process. We'll be moving forward with capital improvement planning very shortly. Let's see. Deferred projects, we actually have we gave you the form at one point for 2007 projects and how those have been implemented. We'll be reporting capital projects to you on a quarterly basis. So I think that's actually already in place. CAFR alignment, I have to say at this point that I just can't make any promises about the CAFR for this year. We've been without a director of accounting, and that responsibility has been solely with the director of accounting in the past. I don't have people on board that are experienced to do that. We're doing some contract work with our independent auditor to get ready to put the CAFR together. It probably is not going to be ready in a timely manner, and for that I apologize, but I just don't have the bodies to get it done. But again, I think maybe what we're looking at here is not so much really what's in the CAFR, but how we report to you overall and what kind of reporting mechanism we keep in place for a month-to-month update to the council and a reference back to where we were and where we are. Again, I'm meeting with the Metaformers folks later today on the reporting issue as a whole. Monthly review. We do intend to close the months by the 10th of the following month. The problem for us right now is you can't close July until you close June, and we haven't closed the fiscal year. Metaformers is on site to help us do that yesterday, today, and tomorrow. We intend to be closed on Wednesday. We discuss this daily with our contract auditors, and we've actually involved Bruce Ali some in our discussions about how to move forward on this. As soon, we will be getting back on track. Hopefully, by your October meeting, we'll be on track to report to you on a monthly basis. And some of the things that we're doing this year will much improve the process for us next year. And all I can say to you is that we will not be this far behind this time next year. We're going to do something different, even if it means that we have to contract with for some additional people or something like that. This is not acceptable to me or to you, and I understand that. Outside agency operations, I think we talked at length about that this morning in the planning meeting. And the outside agency unspent funds, again, all of that I think will probably come through that committee, and the partner agency increases, all of that. County attorneys, you all just discussed. Infill redevelopment, there's another significant process around infill redevelopment. Number of committees working, and I think Dr. Stevens, you're a part of that bigger group, and they're now working in 3 subcommittees. I visited with those folks this morning, and we'll be attending as many of those meetings as I can so that we can get a handle on what their financial needs are going to be in terms of the recommendations that they'll be bringing forward to the council. The FY07 fund balance, well, if we haven't closed, we don't really have a number. So, but we have been running some trials along the way. Again, I hope to have a number that's fairly solid for you by next week. I will continue to say I think we've budgeted very closely, maybe a lot tighter than has been done in the past. One of the things that we didn't take into account as we were making projections about what the fund balance would be at the end of the year, there was kind of this last-minute thing that had to happen from the prior year. The transfer still hadn't been made for the rainy day fund. So that was a couple $1 million that went into the rainy day fund that had to be booked at the very end of June. So what I'm saying right now is I think it looks really tight. I think we are going to make the money that we budgeted as carry forward, but I don't think there's going to be a lot left over. So, but I will communicate that to you just as soon as we are comfortable with a number. Yes, sir?
We should have had the county attorney stay for your report.
I wanted to jump up and say there ain't going to be any money, but I didn't think you wanted me to do that. So, the retirement impact, I think we talked about that actually at the last meeting. And department and projects reporting, that was something that we deferred, I think, that discussion until we get the report from management partners. And the police and firefighters pension planning, you had at the last work session or one before, you had the actuarial present that to you. We continue to work on how to deal with that problem, and we'll be bringing something to you in the next month or so. We're trying to talk to everybody we can talk to about what the options are in that regard. Over the long haul, how much money are those options going to cost us, and how do we deal with that? So those are all things that one's one in particular that's just going to take us some time to pull all the information together to get it to you. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Lane.
Good afternoon, Commissioner. How are you? I just, your report prompted me to ask just a couple of questions here. Can you tell me how many accounting positions you currently have open at this time?
I don't have, well, I have the director of accounting open. That position has been hired and will be on board October 1. But
Okay, so you're going to be fully staffed pretty soon?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's good.
Let me point out, though, what I have been saying to my accounting staff, because I have numerous people that are at the 80-hour max on comp time, and a number of people that that lost vacation time because they can't use it. What we can't get our arms around right now is how much effort is everything going to take once we're running clean in STARS. And what's happening for them right now is that we are still cleaning up, running in production for months on end, and creating problems as we're running. So while I'm going to be fully staffed, I'm not willing to say yet that that's the right level of staffing for that division. So I may be coming back to you with the, assuming the mayor agrees.
Well, that was going to be my second question, is how the STARS accounting system is coming along. I haven't seen the report, I don't believe, published with accounting for this fiscal year, and of course,
Right.
I know you're still working on the year end. We're about 90 days into this fiscal year. So how is that? Could you give us a little overview on exactly how that's done?
From every indication, I'm kind of watching things on a daily basis. Bill O'Mara's watching revenue. I'm watching the expenditures. You know, we're still running an interface between payroll and STARS, so we still run payroll on the mainframe, and then we have to post those entries. Those entries have not been posted beginning July 1 because the same people who do those postings are the people who are trying to get 07 closed. So while we know how much every payroll is and we're keeping track, we have not run any STARS reports in the current fiscal year for that reason, because payroll has not been posted to the system. I basically said to our folks on Friday that this is it. We're drawing the line in the sand this week. We're closing, and it may not be pretty, and we may have to deal with some things with our auditors. I hope not. But we can't continue to plug away at this and get further and further into 08 We're already basically almost 3 months behind now in '08. It's just not acceptable. At some point, you have to just draw the line in the sand and say, we've cleaned all we can clean, and we're going to drive on.
Have your trial year-end closing statements, have they been significantly out of balance, or are they pretty close? I mean,
Depends on what you call significant.
couple of million among friends?
When we left here on Friday afternoon, we were under $1 million. Now, what I can say is our cash in the bank and what we know to reconcile against, the cash in the bank is correct. The problem is what was put into the system. And because so many of those entries were one-sided early on, we're still trying to correct some of those. But again, the Metaformers people were very hopeful yesterday that we were going to be able to get much closer than we are right now. And again, our auditors are well aware of what we're doing and the changes that we're making in the system and the cleanup that we're doing. And I mean, they're nervous because now they're behind because we were supposed to allow them to begin work the first week in September, and of course, they're still not working.
Well, do you feel that the council needs to provide any additional funding to help you through this period? So maybe bring some other experts in? I mean,
Actually, I already have 2 temps that we brought in that have PeopleSoft experience and are accounting types. You know, there comes a point, I'm sure you understand, when you can get to the point that you have too many hands. And I really think with what we have available to us right now, we're going to be able to do this. It's just not happening as timely as we would like for it to. And it says nothing about the people that are doing the work. They're working diligently. They have the expertise to do what they're doing. It's just overwhelming.
Okay. Just the last thought I had is on the long-range budget projections going out for 5 years. Just speaking for myself, not for this committee, I think that is one of our top priorities because we need to see, what our, how much if we're in and out of balance, if we have structural problems with the long-term revenues and expenses. So as soon as you get these problems cleaned up, I hope you make that a priority.
I can assure you it's a priority for me, too.
All right. Thank you very much, Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Lane. Mrs. Gordon.
Thank you, Dr. Chair. Commissioner, thank you very much. I have a question, and then I wanted to just clarify something you just said. You haven't made any payroll entries since the fiscal year began. Right. Okay, so that's just payroll.
Just payroll.
Okay.
And again, we know how much it is.
Right.
It's just the technical part of posting it hasn't happened.
Mm-hmm. My question is on number 16, the retirement impact, and the anticipated increase in retirements. And can you flesh out a little bit what you expect from management partners? What sort of, I mean, I know you can't know what their recommendation is, but you said that you would be looking to them to make some kind of a recommendation on the retirement issue?
If I did, I'm sorry, I misspoke, or I'm not.
Okay. So okay, then go back to the retirement issue.
The retirement, okay, what I thought I said there was we've already prepared the information about who's eligible and has shared that with council staff and what that impact might be.
Okay.
What we need to do as we move into the '09 budget is make a decision about how much we're going to set aside to deal with that issue. Because for urban county government, there are really 2 issues there. There's one is the issue of the payouts for vacation and holiday, and that might be unusually high for any given fiscal year. And the other is the loss of expertise. Generally, those people that are ready to retire are the ones with the most knowledge about what's been going on, and you need to be making plans about how to deal with that transfer of knowledge and getting people up to speed. So we're well aware of the issue. We've run the dollars. So it's a plan that needs to be put forward about how we deal with this.
Okay.
But I think it's something that the administration will bring along to you with the budget,
Okay.
the 09 budget.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Garten. Mr. Gray.
Actually, Commissioner Kelly, I guess my question, or my comment or question, or encouragement, probably doesn't go to you as much as it does to, I don't know, Joe, are you boss? Are you direct line? Mr. Joe in the back of the room. This guy's number 17, which is my little passion about the metrics, and I know it is yours as well. I'm just inquiring as to whether perhaps maybe you all are getting any further along on coming to some suggestions as to whether ICMA's model may be the benchmark for us, and we might be able to start picking some of that up and picking some of them off. We had, while you're on the way up, our council administrator did a little bit more digging on this, and Rebecca found out that I believe Charlie's been a member of ICMA, and maybe someone else has been as well. So there's been some exposure to ICMA in the previous administrations.
That is correct. Charlie is a member and is working on his certification, city management certification. So he is knowledgeable. We had a discussion just last week with the management partners folks, with Jerry, about the things that we can begin to put in place. We don't have to wait until the work is completed, but things that we can start putting in place. One of the things that we talked about was those things that we have enough data and information about. What's been interesting is getting a baseline, if you understand what I'm saying. And so it's going to take them a little while longer, and they're just a third of the way into the process here. Take them a little while longer to bring some recommendations to us relative to, let me say, a more thorough recommendation. But yes, we agree with you, and one of the things that we've been having conversation with Councilman Myers and his committee about performance expectations and measurements for outside agencies, and been working our way through that process, trying to come to an understanding about what the expectations should be and what's measurable and appropriate. And that's been a good discussion, by the way. So, yes, sir, it is on our radar screen, and it is something that we want to roll out as much as we can when we can. Now, whether that vehicle is the appropriate one to employ, they are certainly very familiar with it, Jerry and his team. And they'll make a recommendation to us.
So maybe, Joe, I guess the context for this has to some extent is, in, for example, committee meeting this morning of sanitary sewers.
Yes, sir.
Some of the questions, in my mind at least, from a management point of view.
Yes, sir.
If we dig into those, if we dig into some of the root causes of some of the issues, I suspect that some of the instruments that ICMA has as a general model, that they've been, across many jurisdictions, many cities, some of the answers to some of the questions would emerge through the instruments, through the metrics and the measures that ICMA has already, done the exhaustive reviews in order to identify. Sure. And so that's what I'm getting, is that if they have the appropriate metrics for hundreds of jurisdictions, hundreds of other cities have been identified, and we know that other cities have sewage systems, and if they can be that, if it represents low-hanging fruit for us to go ahead and pick off that's really what I'm anxious about. And if you all are looking at that and deliberately, intentionally right now, I think it would, we'd certainly appreciate it, and I think it can be informing as we go forward and as soon as possible.
We are, and there's no desire to reinvent the wheel here. If there's something in place that we can use, and that's certainly a place where we started. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you. Are there further? Mr. Maloney.
I have the same question that Mr. Gray was on there, and I guess about 3 months ago, you brought this up in a committee as a whole on some of your, what I think y'all been talking about. We tabled that, and I was wondering, I thought they were going to look at your idea and compare the other ones. When is that, do you know when they were going to bring that back up for discussion that you brought when your intern came out and did a presentation on that?
I'll try to respond to that, not to speak for the Vice Mayor, but what we had suggested was, since we were doing the performance audit, the management audit, and that to accomplish that or begin that process would give us a better understanding as to what measurements we might need and could put in place. Absolutely agree that this vehicle is a logical vehicle for consideration, but again, having a little difficulty getting the baseline information to start with, and the mechanisms being in place to capture that information, part of the answer to the question is, as our technology capacity ramps up and we have the ability to track things. The reference earlier by the county attorney relative to public safety and police being able to use their mobile data terminals to enter citations and information, that will be much easier to capture and track once that's available. So what we had asked was, let us get a start on the management audit, get into that process, get as far as we need to, and then have that discussion.
One thing I'm remembering now from the conversation with Jerry Newfarmer.
Yes, sir.
Was he mentioned, when I brought up ICMA, he mentioned that when he was city manager of Cincinnati, he was actually, apparently he was a co-founder of ICMA, so he has lots of familiarity with it, and maybe you all can just give us an idea as to whether or not you think that model's going to be reasonable to adopt or to join, whatever, and then when there may be some of our departments who would be willing to start adoption.
Yes, sir.
Of those, creating their instrument panels, so, that would be common to the template of ICMAs.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And we'll do that.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Mr. Senior Advisor, right? What is the appropriate salutation? Joe.
Joe.
Mr. Kelly?
Joe.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Joe. Any other items about item 2? Not. We'll go to item 3, and I think perhaps the Commissioner told us that next week we can expect preliminary information about 07, and that by this time next month we should have the data from June, July, and September.
July, August.
08.
Right. I will say, at least on the revenue side, we are ahead of last year. We're watching that at the end of every week, so we're watching the numbers very closely. They're just not in a reporting format yet.
Okay. Are there any further questions, items for the committee to consider? If not, a motion is in order to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye. Thank you.